sell his soul when a man wants to know. Will a man change his mind, hoping to find lost reality? All that you've been and all you've become. It's all you can be under the sun. Can a man hope to last, not knowing his past? If he chooses to stay, will the world fade away? All that I know is all that I know. And all that I know is all.
They were an enormously strong culture that was used to resisting pressure from above, which had for centuries never had a compatible relationship with the English crown. And when you put all those pieces together and you let them grow culturally and otherwise for a couple of generations out in the wilderness, they developed their own sense of America.
In 1540, Hernando de Soto made contact with the Anicatua peoples living in western North Carolina. Spanish explorer Juan Pardo followed the route laid out by Hernando de Soto some 26 years later, encountering the indigenous peoples of the Southern Highlands.
The people of Wara reportedly helped the Juan Pardo soldiers build their first permanent shelter between 1566 and 1568. Hernando de Soto and Juan Pardo described several permanent settlements along the French Broad and Catawba rivers in western North Carolina. Pardo records in his travel journal that the natives built shelters for the Spanish explorers in Wara, which is present-day Morganton, Cauchy, which is now Marshall, and Tokay, which is now Asheville. These were most likely round structures built of wattle and daub walls with roofs of thatched reeds.
Within the Cherokee culture, that personal freedom is always balanced by responsibility to the family, the clan, the town, and the tribe. The Cherokees, they had that all figured out. I mean, they could draw the most amazing maps. You know, they understood how all the rivers connected, they understood the ridges and the gaps, and these are part of some of the myths and legends. And so I think that dealing with a landscape with this amount of complexity, diversity of plant and animal life, I think it made them smart.
Jack went a-sailing, a trouble on his mind, to leave his native country and his darling dear behind. Sing ree and sing low, so fare you well, my dear.
The history of the settlers of the Southern Highlands would not be complete without recognition of the fact that their legacy of resilience was forged by a life of hardship and an innate resistance to being beholden to the government. Many of us forget the settlers' exceptional resilience, which was fashioned from a long history of independent thinking and resistance to the British Crown. It's easy to overlook the factors that prepared the settlers for life in the New World. Their considerable grit was developed through fighting for every scrap of modest economic advantage, an unparalleled work ethic, and a healthy, rebellious nature. It's important to remember the settlers' fortitude. Struggle was a way of life for them, as they had a long history of taming a hostile landscape and navigating their way through poverty, scarcity, and governmental oppression in the old country.
European traders learned of the Cherokees' alliance with the British and helped them to construct fortifications of heavy hewn logs.
This is a typical 18th century blockhouse. North Carolina's westernmost frontier fortification was a log blockhouse built at Paint Rock in 1793 on the Tennessee border. Others were built along the French Broad River upstream toward present-day Asheville.
This is believed to be the foundation of the William Nielsen barn. It was built before 1800, making it the oldest known barn surviving in Madison County, North Carolina. This is the G.W. Gahagan House. It was built in 1849, and it served as a stagecoach inn.
The Civil War brought many changes to mountain farms. Union and Confederate troops traveled to new places and experienced different people, food, and customs. They also discovered tobacco, which was readily available and convenient to smoke and chew.
Before the introduction of flue-cured tobacco in the Southern Highlands, the classic Appalachian barn was a livestock barn.
The bright leaf or flue-cured tobacco barn was the first new barn form introduced to the Southern Appalachian farms since the settlement period.
The Oscar Young barn was built around 1915, and it's one of the first barns to change from the convention of the gable or A-shaped roof. In this barn, there's a slight break in the slope of the roof, suggesting that the builders incorporated a gamble roof shape.
The Meadows barn was built around 1923 and features Spring Creek Valley's first gambrel roof, made possible by the introduction of metal roofing. Before this, the standard split oak wood shingle roof was common. It required a continuous steep slope in order to quickly shed rain and snow.
A 1930s-era log barn built for livestock and burley tobacco. This is a new combined-use tradition. The Appalachian Bank Barn, as you see here, is a variant of the Pennsylvania Dutch Bank Barn.
This is the Bruce home, which was built in 1912. It was the earliest craftsman bungalow-style house in Madison County, North Carolina. It was a Sears Roebuck kit house.
By the 1930s, the demand for burley tobacco barn space necessitated that a new type of barn be developed. As burley tobacco production increased, farmers needed more barn space to air cure their harvested tobacco.
Many farmers adapted their old 19th century livestock barns in different ways so they could cure burley tobacco.
The federal support program for tobacco ended in 2004. This resulted in a very uncertain future for burley tobacco in the Southern Highlands.
One of the interesting discoveries that we've made in this project in assessing and analyzing the barn building traditions in the Southern Highlands is that there was a timber frame construction tradition here, where builders used mortise and tenon joinery, they used pegs, and they fitted these timbers together, large timbers, and formed these massive hewn log and hewn timber barns. Now, this was happening in the 19th century. As sawmills became more prevalent and more accessible, the timber frame tradition began to die out. But most folks think of New England or other parts of the country where there was an ongoing and notable timber frame tradition. Here, it's a relatively new discovery for us in this work.
This is an overview of the unique built environment created by the peoples who have over many thousands of years inhabited the mountains and valleys and buffalo trails and river basins of the Southern Appalachians. These makers, Native American peoples, European settlers, created new horizons as they sought to transform these unforgiving mountains into a land of promise for themselves and for future generations. With exceptional ingenuity and a ceaseless drive to tame the land, they nurtured a remarkable ability to make a living from less than an hospitable environment. Through dogged persistence, they fashioned agricultural and residential structures that were using very few tools and resources and only what was available, leaving an inventory of historic houses and barns that mirror a singular melding of cultures, histories, architectural traditions that remain on view today, just outside our door.
By yon bonny banks and by yon bonny breeze, where the sun shines bright on Loch Lomond, where me and my true love will ever want to gaze. On the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. Oh, here's the high road, and I'll take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland of on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. 'Twas there that we parted in yon shady glen, on the steep, steep side of an old Highland hills we view, and the moon coming over glow. Oh, here's the high road, and I'll take the low road. I'll be in Scotland of the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond.